Welcome back, deep divers. We're diving deep today, and some might say we're going really deep.
Deeper than usual, perhaps.
Exactly. We're tackling a topic that sparks a lot of curiosity, but also, let's be honest, a fair share of apprehension. Anal pleasure.
It's definitely one of those things people whisper about more than they shout about.
Absolutely. And that's why we're here. We're using Anal Sex Basics, the beginner's guide to maximizing anal pleasure for everybody, to, well, get to the bottom of it all.
Pun intended.
Maybe just a little. But seriously, whether you're completely new to this, thinking about trying it out, or just want to understand it better, this deep dive is for you.
This guide is a real treasure trove of information. It starts with the author's personal journey, which is so relatable. That initial discomfort, not knowing where to turn, and then stumbling upon this whole new world.
And that world, in this case, was the Body Electric School.
Right, where they met Chester Maynard, a real pioneer in expanding how we think about anal play. Not just intercourse, but a whole spectrum of possibilities.
It's amazing how he was already challenging those traditional notions back then.
Way ahead of his time. And speaking of challenging notions, the guide doesn't shy away from tackling some of the biggest myths surrounding anal sex.
The top 10 nasty rumors, as the author calls them.
Oh yeah, and they really address them head on. Like the first one, the idea that anal sex is unnatural. I mean, come on.
Where do we even begin with that one?
The guide puts it perfectly.
Yeah.
If it's so unnatural, then why are there so many nerve endings there? It's like, hello, our bodies are giving us a pretty clear signal.
And, it playfully asks, are lingerie and Valentine's Day roses natural? Are those part of some ancient mating ritual?
Touché. The point is, what's truly natural is consensual pleasure, whatever form that takes for you.
I couldn't agree more. And then there's myth number 2, that anal sex is inherently dirty and messy.
The guide actually points out that there are plenty of neat freaks who enjoy anal sex. It's all about preparation and having the right tools.
And let's be real, any kind of sex can get messy if you're not careful.
True that. But this one really gets blown out of proportion. Okay, myth number 3. It's always painful. I think this is a big one for a lot of people.
It's understandable, right? It's a sensitive area. But the guide emphasizes that pain is often a sign that something's not quite right. It could be going too fast, not enough lube, or maybe even touching the wrong spot.
It's all about listening to your body and your partner's body. Pain shouldn't be part of the equation. Pleasurable, pain-free anal sex is definitely achievable.
And that brings us to myth number 4, that anal sex is dangerous.
There are definitely risks, like with any sexual activity. Tearing, infections, even losing a toy, those are all valid concerns.
But the guy reassures us that there are ways to prevent those issues. Safer sex practices, good communication, knowing your anatomy. It's all about being informed and taking the right steps.
Which is like a theme throughout this whole guide. Okay, myth number 5, that it causes hemorrhoids.
Oh boy, that's a persistent one. But it's not as straightforward as people might think. The guide explains that hemorrhoids are swollen blood vessels often caused by straining.
Like during bowel movements or even from sitting too long.
Exactly. So while straining during anal sex could potentially aggravate hemorrhoids, it's not necessarily the cause. Slow, relaxed anal play is unlikely to be a problem. And there's actually a survey quote in the guide from someone whose hemorrhoids have gotten better since they started having regular anal sex.
So it really varies from person to person. Another interesting one is myth number 6. I hate rectal exams, so anal sex must be horrible.
Ugh, I think we've all been there, that awkward doctor's appointment. But come on, it's totally different.
Yeah, comparing a clinical rectal exam to intimate anal play is like comparing apples and oranges. One is about medical necessity, the other is about pleasure and connection. They're in completely different realms.
Absolutely. Now, myths 7 and 8 are ones that really need to be debunked. Anal sex makes men gay, and real men don't have anal sex.
So outdated. It's 2025, people. Let's just put it out there. Sexual orientation is not determined by what you do in the bedroom. It's about who you're attracted to, not what acts you engage in.
And the guide points out that many straight men enjoy receiving anal play. It feels good. The prostate is right there. There are tons of nerve endings. Why wouldn't they enjoy it?
Makes sense to me. And there's even an anecdote in the guide about a group of male friends who started exploring anal sex after reading books like The Sensuous Woman and The Joy of Sex.
I love that. Just goes to show you how much curiosity is out there, even if people are afraid to talk about it.
Totally. And myth number 9, the fear that regular anal sex loosens the anus and causes incontinence is something we'll get into more detail later. It's all about relaxation and gradual introduction, which helps prevent those kinds of issues.
So the last myth we need to tackle, number 10, is that there's no such thing as anal pleasure.
Oh, come on.
I know, right? It's
No.
like saying there's no such thing as chocolate. The guide goes into detail about the sheer number of nerve endings in and around the anus, the potential of the perineal sponge, the P-spot, and for those with prostates, the mind-blowing intensity of prostate orgasms.
It's not just about penetration either. There's a whole world of external stimulation that can be incredibly pleasurable. So yeah, to say there's no pleasure to be found there is just plain wrong.
Totally. Now that we've debunked some of the biggest myths, let's dive into the anatomy that makes all this pleasure possible.
All right, let's get anatomical. The guide starts with some basic terminology. And, it even tries to make it more approachable. Like, instead of anus, it uses the term rosebud.
I kind of like that. It sounds a little less clinical, a little more
Yeah.
friendly.
Right. And then there's the anal canal, which is basically the passageway. And then we have the anal cushions, these 3 vertical columns of tissue that help with continence.
Now, the guide emphasizes the importance of being gentle with those anal cushions because they can get displaced or damaged if things get too rough.
Which can lead to bleeding, which nobody wants. There's even a survey quote in the guide where someone mentions how gentle fingering helps to put things where they should be before sex.
It's all about being mindful and respectful of your body. And speaking of being mindful, comfortable positioning is key. The guide recommends positions like the fetal position, where your legs are drawn up toward your chest, or any position where your legs are at a right angle or closer to your body.
This helps straighten out the rectum so penetration is more comfortable and you avoid any sharp bends or twists. Nobody wants a kink in their hose.
Exactly. Now, the guide circles back to hemorrhoids, explaining that they're essentially swollen blood vessels in the anal cushions. And as we mentioned before, straining can be a big contributor.
Which is why relaxation and taking it slow are so important. The guide also talks about erectile tissue and how it's present in various erogenous zones.
Like the clitoris, the G-spot, and of course, the penis.
Right. And guess what? The perineal sponge, or P-spot, also has erectile tissue. That's why it can be so sensitive and pleasurable when stimulated.
This is all starting to make a lot of sense now. Now let's talk about something really important for both pleasure and overall health. The pelvic floor muscles.
Ah, yes, the Kegel kings and queens. The guide explains how these muscles play a role in both continence and pleasure. They contract during arousal and orgasm, and strengthening them can actually intensify those sensations.
There's even a survey quote from someone who said that doing Kegels helped them experience internal orgasms and squirting.
Whoa, see folks? Kegels aren't just for grandmas, they can really enhance your sexual experiences. And for those of you with a prostate, the guide provides a good overview of where it is and how it swells during arousal.
They use a tomato analogy to describe its size and texture.
I've always liked that one. Makes it easier to visualize. And let me tell you, stimulating the prostate can lead to some seriously intense full-body orgasms.
Some survey quotes even describe them as awesome, body-quivering, mind-blowing.
Sounds pretty amazing to me. The guide briefly mentions the bulb of the clitoris or penis and how it can be stimulated through shallow anal penetration, but the sensations might not be as intense.
And it also touches on that feeling you might get when you're stressed, like you need to have a bowel movement. It explains that it's part of the fight or flight response.
Makes sense.
Right. Your body's getting ready for action.
It's like, time to either fight or flee. Gotta clear the decks. Okay, moving on to preparation and hygiene.
This is where things get a little more practical.
Exactly. For external play, the guide recommends a quick wash in the shower or even using alcohol-free wipes. Pretty straightforward. But for internal play, it goes into more detail about douching and enemas.
And, this is one of those things that people often feel squeamish about, but it's really all about comfort and hygiene.
Exactly. The goal is to remove any fecal matter, which makes the experience more pleasurable and hygienic for everyone involved. The guide explains how to use a syringe or enema bottle with warm water. You can use plain water or add a teaspoon of sea salt per liter, and it emphasizes using a comfortable temperature and inserting it gently.
And of course, always use clean equipment. For a deeper cleanse, you can use an enema bag, but that takes a bit more time and preparation.
And the guide really stresses that you should not share equipment, ever. Now, this is important. The guide strongly advises against putting alcohol or caffeine in the rectum. It calls it toxic douches.
Because it gets absorbed into your bloodstream so quickly. Not a good idea. And then there's the topic of hair removal. Shaving, trimming, waxing. It's all about personal preference.
The guide mentions that some people find it more comfortable or hygienic, but it also emphasizes that natural is beautiful. It even includes a survey quote from someone who finds furry butt hair super sexy.
To each their own right. The important thing is to do what feels right for you and your partner. And finally, the guide stresses the importance of avoiding anal play with any open cuts.
Especially if there's a risk of STIs. Speaking of which, let's talk about safer sex. This is absolutely crucial, folks.
No matter what kind of sex you're having, safer sex practices are always essential.
Absolutely. The guide emphasizes using condoms or gloves for anything going inside the butt. Penises, toys, fingers, even hands. Always use a barrier.
And it reiterates waiting for cuts to heal before engaging in anal play. You can use lemon juice or rubbing alcohol to check for open wounds. If it stings, don't do it.
And dental dams are a must for oral anal play. They prevent the transmission of STIs and also keep things a little cleaner.
Speaking of keeping things clean, don't share anal toys.
Especially for anal play, everyone has different intestinal bacteria, so sharing toys can increase your risk of infections.
And lubrication. Oh my goodness, lubrication is key.
Yeah.
Not only does it make things more pleasurable, but it also helps prevent tearing, which can reduce the risk of STIs.
The guide recommends thick, unscented lubes and lots of it. It even suggests using a thicker lube inside the anus and a thinner lube on the object.
And don't forget about the importance of regular STI testing, especially if you have multiple partners. Now let's get into some specific STIs that can be transmitted through anal sex.
We've got E. coli, Shigella, parasites, hepatitis A and B, HIV, chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, and HPV. It's quite a list, and it's important to be aware of the risks.
Absolutely. But the good news is that there are ways to protect yourself. Washing thoroughly, using barriers like condoms, and getting vaccinated for hepatitis A and B can all significantly reduce your risk.
And remember, open communication with your partners is key. Talk about your sexual history, get tested regularly, and practice safer sex together. Now, before we get to internal anal play, let's spend some time on external anal play.
This is something that often gets overlooked, but it can be incredibly pleasurable on its own.
And it can also be a great way to warm up for internal play, especially if you're new to anal stimulation. The guide actually references Chester Maynard, who we talked about earlier, and how he often focused on external pleasure in his workshops.
And there are so many benefits to external play. It feels amazing, it helps the anus relax, and it can help overcome any anticipatory pain or anxiety you might be feeling.
And there are so many ways to explore external anal play. The guide talks about butt massage techniques like using vibrating hands, stretching the skin around the anus, gliding your hand down the butt crack, even using your knuckles.
And don't forget the lube. Always use lube or massage oil to make things more comfortable.
And all that fingertip stimulation is not only pleasurable, but it also helps you get more familiar with your own anatomy and your partner's anatomy.
Which is a great foundation for any kind of sexual exploration. And then there's oral anal play, or rimming, which can also be super hot. The guide talks about using dental dams to keep things safe, and it suggests different techniques like making circles with your tongue, sucking and licking.
It even mentions how some people experience an increase in anal sensitivity and desire for butt play during gender transition, potentially linked to testosterone.
Fascinating. The body is an amazing thing. So, yeah, don't underestimate the power of external anal play. It's definitely worth exploring. All right, ready to take the plunge? Let's talk about internal anal pleasure.
All right, let's do it. First things first. Start slow and use plenty of lube.
I cannot emphasize that enough. The guide recommends starting with one finger and gradually increasing the number of fingers as you get more comfortable.
And listen to your body. If you feel any pain, stop and reassess. It's not a race.
Breathing and relaxation are also super important. And, even during internal penetration, you can continue to massage the external area around the anus.
Keep those nerve endings happy. Once you're comfortable with one finger, you can try 2 or even 3. And you can also experiment with alternating fingers from each hand.
And then there's thrusting, which can be super pleasurable. But again, make sure you're using plenty of lube and experiment with different speeds to find what feels best for you.
The guide also encourages combining anal play with other forms of pleasure, like clitoral or penile stimulation, kissing, massage, whatever you and your partner enjoy. It's all about making it a full body experience.
Absolutely. And, it's normal to feel some discomfort or even awkwardness at first, especially if it's a new experience. It's like learning any new skill. It takes time and practice.
And don't be afraid to experiment on your own. Solo play is a great way to get more familiar with your body and what feels good.
Now, for those of you with a prostate, let's talk about the G-spot for outies, as the guide so aptly calls it.
Ah, the prostate. It's a magical little gland that can produce some seriously intense orgasms.
The guide even quotes sex therapist John Presick, who describes prostate orgasms as internal, heavy, dense, and continuously pleasurable.
Sign me up. So how do you find this magical gland? Well, it's located through the anterior rectal wall, usually about 2 to 4 inches in.
And the guide gives tips for stimulating it on your own, whether you prefer reaching between your legs or from behind, using fingers or thumbs, and experimenting with different positions.
And there are so many techniques you can use. There's the milking the prostate technique, which uses a clock analogy. There's the doorbell technique, where you press repeatedly. There's the windshield wiper, where you move your finger back and forth. You can make circles, use vibration. The possibilities are endless.
The guide also emphasizes that prostate orgasms can be different from penile orgasms. They can be more intense, more full body, and even lead to a greater release of fluid.
It's like a whole other level of orgasm. And some guys even experience multiple orgasms from prostate stimulation. Now, let's talk about how to approach the topic of anal sex with a partner.
Communication is key, right?
Always. The guide suggests starting the conversation outside the bedroom, maybe in a more general conversation about sex and what you both enjoy.
It's important to be honest about your feelings, whether you're excited, nervous, or even a little scared.
And listen to your partner's feelings too. It's a two-way street.
The guide even suggests some specific phrases you can use to initiate the conversation. Like, I was reading about anal play and I'm curious to know what you think about it. Or, I've been wanting to explore anal stimulation more. Would you be open to talking about that?
It also introduces a helpful process for broaching difficult topics, developed by sex educator Reed Mihalko. It's all about being direct, being positive, and giving your partner space to respond.
And remember, your partner might not be interested, and that's okay. It's important to respect their boundaries.
Absolutely. And if they are interested, make sure you're both on the same page about what you want to try. Be specific about the kinds of stimulation you enjoy and what your limits are.
And don't forget about consent. Just because you talked about it before doesn't mean you don't need to check in with each other in the moment.
Right. Always make sure you have enthusiastic consent from your partner before doing anything. And if they say no, respect their decision. No means no, always.
Now, once you're ready to get down to business, there are tons of different positions you can try.
The guide goes through a bunch of them, emphasizing comfort and variety. For bottom-on-top positions, there's the squat, where the bottom partner is squatting over the top partner.
And there's the reverse, where the bottom partner is facing away from the top partner.
These positions are great because the bottom partner has a lot of control over the depth and pace, but they can be a bit tiring for the bottom. Then there are the doggy-style positions.
Like the classic doggy style, the plank, the spoon dog, the thigh dog, and the flat doggy.
Doggy style is great for deep penetration, and it can also put pressure on the perineum, which can be very pleasurable for many people.
Then there's missionary, or bottom on the bottom.
You can try variations like the ramp or the Pilates. And then there's standing, where you're facing each other. And of course, there are positions specifically for finger or toy play.
Like taking turns, where the top partner sits between the bottom partner's knees, or the fetal position.
And then there's 69, which can be done with fingers or toys. The guide also mentions a bunch of other positions like the open face sandwich, the dog's breakfast brunch, and even sex slings.
The point is to experiment and find what feels best for you and your partner. And don't be afraid to switch positions if things get uncomfortable or boring. Okay, let's talk toys.
Toys are a great way to add some extra fun and excitement to anal play, especially if you're exploring on your own.
The guide recommends starting with your fingers to get familiar with your anatomy before moving on to toys.
And there's so many different materials to choose from. You've got softer materials like PVC, rubber, latex, and jelly. These are usually more affordable, but they're also porous, which means they can harbor bacteria.
So you want to make sure you're cleaning them thoroughly, and it's generally not a good idea to share them.
Then there's silicone, which is body-safe, non-porous, and super easy to clean. It's a bit more expensive, but it lasts a lot longer.
You can also find toys made of metal, glass, and even wood. Each material has its own pros and cons, so do your research and choose what's right for you.
The guide also talks about butt plugs, which can be a great way to get used to the feeling of being open and relaxed.
They're also a good stepping stone to wider objects. And, a lot of people think that butt plugs stretch the anus, but that's not actually true. They just relax the sphincter muscles.
Which is why it's important to wait a few minutes after removing a butt plug before engaging in other forms of anal play. The sphincter needs time to close up again.
And then there are strap-on harnesses, which could be a lot of fun for both partners. It lets the wearer experience penetration from a different perspective.
And there are so many different types of harnesses to choose from. You've got two-strap harnesses, one-strap harnesses, and even thigh harnesses.
The guide actually recommends thigh harnesses, which are often overlooked. They're super comfortable, and they can be worn under clothing, which can add a whole other element of fun.
And don't forget about all the accessories you can use with a harness, like dildos, vibrators, and even butt plugs. You can really get creative.
Now, let's talk about safer sex supplies. Again, this is super important.
Condoms, gloves, dental dams, always use a barrier. And make sure your condoms are stored properly and haven't expired.
And avoid using spermicides, as they can irritate the sensitive tissues in the anus.
And finally, let's talk about lube again.
Because you can never have too much lube.
Exactly. The guide really emphasizes how important lube is for anal play, especially because there's very little natural lubrication in the anus. It recommends experimenting with different types of lube to see what you like best.
You've got water-based lubes, silicone-based lubes, and oil-based lubes. Make sure you choose a lube that's compatible with your condoms or toys.
And avoid using lubes with numbing agents.
They can mask any pain, which can lead to injuries. Now let's talk about aftercare. What do you do after you've had anal sex?
Well, first things first. Clean up. The guide recommends having a designated sex pot where you can put your toys to soak in soapy water.
And make sure you pee afterwards. This helps flush out any bacteria that might have gotten into your urethra, which can help prevent UTIs.
The guide also talks about some potential after effects of anal sex, like bleeding, discomfort, and even changes in bowel movements.
If you experience any bleeding, it's usually not serious, and it should stop on its own. But if you're concerned, see a doctor.
And if you experience any pain or discomfort, take it easy and give your body time to heal.
The guide also recommends taking probiotics, drinking plenty of water, and eating a healthy diet. This helps replenish your body and promote healing.
And don't forget about emotional aftercare. Anal sex can bring up a lot of emotions, both positive and negative, so it's important to take some time to process those feelings.
Talk to your partner, journal, meditate, do whatever you need to do to feel grounded and centered. And finally, let's talk about some more advanced forms of anal play.
Things like BDSM, spanking, restraints, and fisting.
Now, this is definitely not for everyone, and it's important to only engage in these activities if you're both experienced and comfortable.
And enthusiastically consenting. Consent is always crucial, especially when it comes to more intense forms of play.
The guide goes into detail about how to prepare for fisting, the importance of using lots of lube, going slowly, and respecting your body's limits. It also emphasizes the importance of aftercare for fisting, as it can be quite strenuous on the body.
And if you're interested in exploring BDSM, the guide talks about the importance of communication, trust, and setting clear boundaries. It's all about creating a safe and enjoyable experience for both partners.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Anal pleasure is a vast and complex topic, and there's so much more to explore.
But hopefully this deep dive has given you a good foundation and sparked some curiosity.
Remember, the most important things are to be safe, be informed, and most of all, have fun. And don't be afraid to ask questions and seek out more information. There are tons of resources available, including this awesome guide.
And don't forget to check out the glossary at the end of the guide for definitions of key terms like fluid bonded, incontinence, pegging, PPG, rimming, rosebud, STI, top, and trans.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, happy exploring.